So again, good morning. My name is Juli Briskman. I am Vice Chair and Algonquin District Representative on the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. As you can imagine, being the data center capital of the world, these are some issues that Loudoun County has been thinking about for a very long time. So I'm honored and very proud to be the moderator for this session. We have with us the Honorable David Marsden, Senator from District 35, and John Larson, Director of Public Policy and Economic Development at Dominion Energy. In 2020, Virginia set targets for electric generation to be zero greenhouse gas emitting within the next 25 years. However, recent and projected energy demands, fueled in large part by data center growth, are raising concerns whether intermittent sources of renewable energy, such as utility-scale solar, wind can meet the 24/7 power needs of this industry. This session will explore challenges as well as the opportunities to meet these energy needs and what role counties can play in the siting of not only solar and wind, but other non-greenhouse gas emitting generations such as nuclear hydrogen and geothermal. I am pleased to introduce as our first speaker, Senator Marsden, who, as I said, is the 35th District Senator in the Virginia General Assembly, which includes parts of Fairfax County. Prior to his election to the Senate in 2010, he served 4 years in the House of Delegates, representing another portion of Fairfax County. He is the chair of the Agricultural Conservation and Natural Resources Committee and also Appropriations, Transportation, and Rules. He is a graduate of Randolph-Macon College. Prior to his career in politics, Senator Marsden spent 17 years as head of the Fairfax County Juvenile Detention Center until 1999. From 2002, he served as chief deputy and then acting director of the Virginia Department of Juvenile Justice. Senator Marsden is going to speak for a few minutes. I just wanted to let you know that we have presentations in the back of the room. And again, if you would like to sit down, we do have some more seats in the front. And after Mr. Marsden speaks, I will introduce Mr. Larson. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
I'd rather just kind of stand up here. You know, I think energy is going to be the biggest issue this Commonwealth's going to have to deal with in the next 4 years. We passed a Clean Economy Act, and a lot of you are familiar with that, in 2020. And boy, how things on the ground have changed since then. You cannot create, and I try to tell my colleagues all the time, you cannot create these laws, these extensive, long-term, 30-year out laws, and not track them and find out what are the challenges that they are presenting as the real world meets public policy. And you all in local government know all about the real world of public policy. You guys have the toughest job in show business. Sometimes we're a little bit above the fray in the Senate and the House of Delegates trying to set policy that works for everybody. But, you know, it is a difficult thing. And we all look at these problems from a very different kind of standpoint. It reminds me of a joke with Jimmy Dean. Remember Jimmy Dean, the sausage guy, big bad guy, and what have you, told about this? He always talked about this little church in the country in the 1940s. And they're all sitting there in church, and in the back, 3 ladies got the bonnets on, sitting in the back. And the preacher, they're all dipping snuff, by the way. And the preacher stands up and he says, and you folks out there who are drinking, you know where you're headed. Sins of alcohol, demon rum, you better stop right now or you know what's going to happen to you in the afterlife. First little old lady goes, amen, brother, preach it, tell it like it is, tell it like it is. He says, and you gamblers and dancers out there, you know you shouldn't be doing that. You know where that's going to lead to. It's going to lead to all kinds of sin and trouble and difficulties. So you got to stop right now. Second little lady goes, amen, brother, preach it. Tell it like it is. And then the preacher goes, and you snuff dippers out there. And the third little lady says, oh boy, he stopped preaching now. He's meddling. We all know when we're hearing preaching that we like. We all know when people are meddling in our business. And that's the thing. So what happened here with the Clean Economy Act, I was the chief co-patron of it. I had a bill, Jennifer McClellan had a bill, Senator Jennifer McClellan, now Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan, who was a utility lawyer. And at the end of the day, hers was a better bill, and she's Jennifer McClellan and I'm not. So I became chief co-patron along with John Edwards from down here in Roanoke. And we put the Clean Economy Act together, which is to have Virginia in the APCO territory by 2050 be carbon neutral, and the same thing in the Dominion territory by 2045. Pretty ambitious goals. But so what I have done, in terms of looking at where we were and seeing the problems that were coming up in terms of where are we going to get all this clean energy. I did a bill this year. It's not popular with some people. It is with others, but I think it's practical in terms of making our goals about small nuclear modular reactors. I put that bill together to allow Dominion, and somebody else did one for APCO, so that they could do the same thing, which is to go to the SCC when they're ready to do a siting and permitting and start the NRC process, the NRC, excuse me, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It's a long-term process that Congress is trying to shorten up, is to authorize these facilities, and they want to do one at the North End power plant. And I'm a Democrat, and I'm on the same page with the administration on that one. And we went to North End, and we sat down there and celebrated the fact that we can build these small nuclear reactors when the technology is ready, when the safety is ready. And the SEC, who we've turned over most of the decision-making in terms of energy policy in the state, we've turned it over to the SEC, which is what people have wanted. But we all have different issues. We all have different problems with regards to this. So what I did was pull together a study group that's going to lead to a summit that's taking place next Monday. And it's not a summit to just sit there and try to find who to blame for the fact that we're falling behind on clean energy, because we've made tremendous progress on clean energy. I mean, Dominion is off and running with its offshore capabilities. They've started that project. If they expand it, if they double it, which is what they have to make a decision about, but if they have the option to do that, and they've also bought 40,000 acres from Avon Grid off the North Carolina coast, that 1 out of every 4 customers in the Dominion territory just about will be served by that offshore wind. That's astounding. That's absolutely astounding. And but now, we're running into siting problems. We're running into problems around transmission. And so we set to work to solve those. And here's what we did. I decided, the way the General Assembly sometimes operates is we take a bunch of bills, throw them up against the wall, and try to figure out if we can make policy out of one or two of them. And what I wanted to do was to get the discussion started with all of you, with people from the solar world, the data center world, local government, state government, the environmental community, Virginia Free, representing the large businesses, here in the Commonwealth, to bring all these groups together. And I had 6 different meetings starting back in April. We ended up talking with 120 different folks, and we did it under my FOIA exemption. I said, everybody pretend you're in my office and we're talking about a bill. Okay? So I didn't want the press there. I didn't want advocates there, raising their hand and making objections and what have you. I wanted people to be able to speak freely, to be able to say something stupid without having it show up in a newspaper, so that we could really get at the core of a very, very complex problem. Clean energy, because it's so tied into our economic futures. It is so tied in to our air quality here in the Commonwealth. I know that people have different views on climate change, but I happen to believe, based on what I've seen this year, that it is occurring, and that we need to do our part. And the benefits to local governments and to businesses in Virginia to transition away from coal and natural gas to the extent possible does nothing but good things for our Commonwealth. But it's complicated, and everybody has different interests in this whole thing. So I'm having this summit where we're going to talk about some actual potential solutions, and I cannot thank VACO enough. Dean Lynch, Joe Lurch have been working with me and my study group, and I took these study groups and I let them have their head. I didn't sit down in them and try to run the stuff. I trusted these people. And Jay Ford, from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, representing the environmental world, and Joe Lurch and Dean Lynch and some fellows from the solar development world sat down and to work on a process by which we can determine where the sites belong for solar, that respect property rights, that respect local zoning, that provide really, really good information to localities on whether a site is a good place to go, so that we can make the economy work, so that we can protect that farmer, perhaps, that farmer's property rights. You know, we're finding there's all kinds of good things that you can do with solar sites, but you know, they have to be screened, and you don't want to use prime farmland or cut down trees. You want to be near transmission lines. We've got it established with a crowded grid. You know, who pays for the equipment necessary to keep the system reliable? Because that's Dominion's, one of their big issues is keeping reliability. You know, a lot of the solar developers just walking around with an extension cord wanting to plug in and start making money. But you can only put so much electricity on an aging grid. We have huge problems. But John F. Kennedy once said, we don't do things because they are easy. We do things, pardon the accent, because they are hard. And in Virginia, we're going to deal with taking on issues that are hard. And they are. And we have to roll up our sleeves and dig in. And I just can't thank FACO enough for the way that they have approached this problem, the environmental community. Everybody's backed off of some of their positions. The solar developers, there's some bad actors out there that need to be reined in terms of making promises they don't keep. There is, you know, the state, this administration has some differences with the legislature on the Clean Economy Act. We know that we're going to need to maintain natural gas for a time as we transition, but there's nothing but good things that come to the Commonwealth of Virginia if we try to meet the goals of the Clean Economy Act, both for localities, both for the state, and for our national security. Because we're in an energy war, and part of that war is with China on AI, artificial intelligence. Losing that war is going to create a world I don't want to live in, with having those guys. And we're sometimes arguing over the location and whether to put up a 5 megawatt facility. They got 23 nuclear reactors under development. A little easier over there. You know, local government doesn't exist. It's all directed from the top. But we're America. We know what we can do. We roll up our sleeves to get it done. So thank you all very much and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Senator Marsden. I have to agree that if you put something out there and you don't measure it and you don't track it, then it doesn't come to fruition. We had that experience in Loudoun County with an energy plan that was great. It was groundbreaking at the time, but we didn't track it and measure it and put in accountability measures, and we had to redo it when we came into office. So with that, thank you very much. We'll be doing questions after both presenters present. Now we have John Larson, who joined Dominion Energy in 1996 and is currently Director of Public Policy and Economic Development. During John's career at the company, he has held various leadership positions in business development, alternative energy technologies, and construction. Currently, a large part of his time is spent on Dominion Energy's business-to-business and workforce development and outreach activity as the company, as the company moves forward the requirements of the Virginia Clean Economy Act, including 16,000 megawatts of solar power, 5,200 megawatts of offshore wind power, and 2,700 megawatts of storage, with the objective of maximizing opportunities for Virginia's vendors, subcontractors, and suppliers. He's a graduate of North Carolina State University with a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you to VACO for having us here. I tell you, there's not probably a more pertinent topic to speak about as the senator outlined. This is probably the most dynamic period in the energy industry since we really started electrifying the country, right? And you know, what's driving that? I'll talk about some of those factors today. But I think it's, you know, for me and Senator, probably people kind of our generation, we think about the industrial revolution, right? All the cool things, started having mass production. Oh, well, maybe we could put a computer on this and help control it and make it more efficient. That was pretty simple, you know. Maybe you got the data, went to a control room and somebody ran out there, adjusted the machine, came back to see if they got the desired result. Then they kept, adding more with chip development technology. But now, we're not just doing that. We're over here in the corner doing AI to run businesses, to run processes, right? Tremendous change that's going on. So we're in a technology revolution. We kind of advanced past industrial revolution. And to help kind of quantify like that, everybody here has done an internet search, right? So that uses 0.3 watt hours of energy. A chat GTP, one of these new AI searches, uses 2.9, almost 10 times the energy to do that kind of search. That's not even advanced AI, right? With all the machine integration and all the learning, and that's just the beginning of this, right? But we have to do it, as the senator said, because between our commerce, running the government, and national defense, the whole world is doing this, and we can't afford to fall behind. So as we kind of look at those challenges to provide the energy for that, it's going to be a tremendous lift, and it's going to take all of us working together to get there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that increasing energy demand. So the first thing I want to talk about is our integrated resource plan. And so PJM, that's the regional transmission organization that is responsible for working at load growth and making sure there's adequate generation and transmission to get that power to our customers. So in their analytics, they're looking right now at us having a peak in the Dominion zone of 22,700 megawatts. Okay? It's taken us 120 years to get to this point. In 15 years, we will double that, right? We will double what we've done in 120 years in 15 years in Don zone. And that's really the big drivers in that are Dominion Energy, Novec, and Rappahannock Electric Co-op, the three big growth areas that are there. And so we look at that, and it's being driven by data centers, certainly are a big component of it. But think about the reindustrialization of America. We all learned about after COVID, we need to be able to make certain critical components and do things here. So that's a huge factor. We've got the electrification of homes. In Virginia, we're seeing it was already a high level of people that use electricity for heating and cooling. That's becoming more and more prevalent as we go forward. And electrification of transportation. One F-150 Lightning with the largest battery, when it charges, uses the energy that's the equivalent of a small home for 4 days. So it's across the board as we look at what's going on. But this IRP, so what is that doing? So we've got this load growth, and they take into account all of those factors I just talked about. And what it is it's kind of like just it's not a back of the envelope plan. It's a detailed analytical model that goes through all sorts of iterations, but it's a plan, right? Taking in and looking at making sure you're compliant with state and federal law, and how do you get there to meet the customer's needs? And that's all it is a plan. And there are a lot of other requirements that go in there. You can see it's a pretty high number, about 100. We've got a whole team that works on this. As soon as they file one, they start working on the next one because it's that complex of a process. What it is saying, we want to build this transmission line or this generation facility, or that we're for sure it will be this technology. It's all based on available technology today and what we think might be there. And it gives you a roadmap on how to get there. So that's what the IRP is. It gets a lot of attention. We just filed ours, and you'll see a lot of attention when the case comes up as we go forward. So we've got this growth and demand here. How are we going to get there? The one thing I can say is it's more of everything. That's probably the best way to think about it. So when you look here, we ran 4 cases, and I'll talk about the stakeholder case in a minute. But we ran 4 cases. We'll look at the numbers there. They're almost all the same. And the reason we have without EPA in there is that was a request of the State Corporation Commission, because that's under litigation right now, some of the new EPA rules. So they wanted to know, does that factor in or not? but you can see it really doesn't matter. So tremendous growth in every single resource that we have is what we foresee. That gets you to about an 80% carbon-free portfolio in 15 years. And we have always said, and the whole industry says, it's pretty easy to get to 80%. The last 20% is the really hard part, because it's going to take new technology. Senator Marsden talked about SMRs, hydrogen. You know, do we have other technologies that come about as we go? So you've got those cases. Then we had a stakeholder process very similar to what the senator's going through now, which we had a large number of groups to say, okay, what case would you guys like to see run? Part of the requirement that we had. And so we met in all these little subgroups, very similar to what Senator Marsden's process was. And we consolidated the input so that we could get it into the model and run it. And these are the results. Now, I will tell you, we don't consider that to be a primary portfolio because there are some things that have to happen in there that just aren't there today. One thing would be transmission imports. So the model right now, the capacity to import power into Virginia is around 3,000 megawatts. This would take 6,600 megawatts. There's no transmission lines to do it, so you can't do that today. But it is a look at how you could get to 100% with these resources. But we have some concerns about the reliability and can you provide power at 4 in the morning on the coldest nights or at 4 in the afternoon during the hottest days. So a little bit about some other things that are going on. So we've got that proceeding that's before the commission now, and we're really glad we've got 3 solid judges on the State Corporation Commission right now. That is fantastic, and we needed to get 3 judges back on there. Fantastic job with the legislature last year working through that, because we got a lot of things we need to face. So they've got that IRP. Our biennial review, that's our every other year case where we submit our costs and our rates, and the commission reviews all those, make sure we're doing the right thing the right way, and that all customers are being fairly charged. So that's going to be filed here in the spring of next year. I'm going to go down through some of these other things where there's already proceedings before the commission. Energy efficiency is we look at the energy efficiency goals that were contained in the Virginia Clean Economy Act. Now they're going to be looking at what should those goals be 26 through 28. That case is open. The senator mentioned interconnection with solar systems, either net metering on your house. What should the rules be for net metering? What do we need to make sure we do as we go forward with that for interconnection? And then also, what should the cost benefit, how should that be shared? Who should pay what cost and what benefits flow? And how should those be allocated to across different customers? Same thing for people wanting to do solar and distributed energy. How do we look at cost and allocation and then the process for interconnection to make sure we have that safety and reliability? And there's a lot of people that will talk about a lot of things, and it's extremely important to consider all those. The one thing we have to do is have the lights on for everybody 100% of the time. That's what we get up and do every day. And it's really important, and you may think, oh, well, maybe it's not as important. Well, it's extremely important because all the critical infrastructure we have, all the critical infrastructure from a federal perspective and a state perspective, but it's more than just that. It's your aunt that's on dialysis, right? It's your grandmother that has a breathing machine, making sure the power's on for everybody. And so that's how we approach it. It's going to look at how do you make sure we can get these resources done so that we keep the reliability and everybody pays their fair share. So the senator's been doing a lot of work. We have the CEUR. They're going to be doing a lot of work looking at various aspects of energy legislation. JLARC right now is looking at data centers, collecting a lot of information, looking at cost, interconnection, what's it going to require for supply and demand, and how that goes forward and how that should be sited and constructed. They'll have their report out in early December here. Shortly after that, the State Corporation Commission is having a technical conference in which they're looking at the same things that they plan to take up as they go forward in proceedings next year with some of our cases and some of the APCO's cases that have come forward. So a lot of activity. Again, it's great we've got a full commission. It's great we've got the legislature looking at this because it is such a dynamic energy period that there's a great time for us to take a look at it. Just as the senator said, you can do a long-term plan. Well, we didn't have this demand growth at that time at all, did we, Senator? It was like nobody saw this coming. So it's a great time to pull up and take a look at all these factors. A little bit about what's going on with the Virginia Clean Economy Act. So solar and onshore wind, we've got 4,500 megawatts either in operation, under construction, or that we're seeking approval for. So we're going well down the road and staying kind of on the schedule to meet the objectives of the Act. Same thing with energy storage. We've got 500 megawatts op construction or in approval, looking at 2,700 megawatts by 35. I want to call out something that's interesting. So lithium ion is the storage media today, right? I see a phone up back there, and that's what's in your phone, right? Well, in the utility perspective, that gives you about a 4-hour duty cycle. That's good, but it's not really great if you're a utility because you need to be able to provide power for longer periods of time. So we're actually doing some pilots now. They just got approved that are looking at 10-hour batteries and one battery that has a 100-hour duty cycle. So that once that's stored, we can discharge it over a long period of time. So we're trying to look at those new technologies and push the envelope to get there. Offshore wind, we've got 2,600 megawatts under construction, largest in the U.S. and probably the largest or the second largest in the world is going. We're on time, we're on budget. It's a fantastic project. We have 78 of the foundations installed. We'll continue working over this winter and put on the transition pieces and the substation out there as we go forward. We'll come back next year, finish up foundations and start erecting turbines so that by 2026 we'll have 2,600 megawatts on. We certainly already are working on our option with CVOW South, and then with the new wind energy area, we're calling CVOW East, since we're so original in our naming. So we're working on those as we go forward. And then energy efficiency, we've got about $800 million in there that we have spent with about $100 million in low-income areas, and we'll continue to move forward with energy efficiency. There is no doubt that the best thing we can do is be as efficient as possible. I'll ask you a question. How many devices do you have connected at your home when everybody's there? So it's just my wife and I now, and I counted up 14. That's pretty nice, but it is the truth. So while we talk about energy efficiency, we're using more energy at home. We're converting more energy, more homes to heat pumps. And then you've got EV charging. So we have to be really mindful and think about how we incent it. We have 40 programs already for energy efficiency. We're going to be coming out with some more. They're going to be aimed at how to give people incentives to charge during off-peak times, say for an EV, and those types of things as we go forward. So as we get these transitions, we try to adapt the programs to match what's going on in society at that time. Last thing I want to hit is, this is looking at large general service, which most data centers are, and residential load. So we get a lot of questions about how do we make sure everybody's paying their fair share. It's a great question, right? Even before that question started coming up in the general public, we started working on it. So if you look at residentials over there, about 59% of their bill, that's me paying at home, just like you, if you're in a Dominion customer, was transmission, because we've got to move that power all across the state to get homes, right? That's down to 48% now. But what's happened is that as we have more GS4, a lot of data centers, that's gone from 11% to 20% of their bill, okay? So they're carrying a lot more load, and their bills are a heck of a lot better, bigger than ours are too. So you get a double effect there. They use more energy, and it's a higher percentage, so that we're making sure we do it. Also, when you look at data centers, they pay for their interconnection facilities. Okay, they have to pay for that. If they walk away from it, they still pay for it. We do a very unique thing in Virginia. They pay for it over 4 years. Other states are modeling what we do in Virginia because they didn't have that approach. So it would just get socialized and spread out across, but the data centers actually pay all that cost on top of their normal rates. So look forward to talking on the panel today and answering your questions and see where we go. I think that's all I have.
Well, thank you for that. There are a couple seats up here in the front. If anyone doesn't want to stand, we have a couple more spots up here. So, yeah, I have some starter questions, and then we'll ask if the audience has any questions. So the first question is for Senator Marsden. What legislative proposals do you expect to be introduced in the upcoming legislative session? And how do you plan to protect local authority in that legislation?
Okay, thank you, Julie. The CEUR, the Commission on Electric Utility Regulation, has been revitalized. Senator Surabel, Majority Leader in the Senate, has gotten that legislation through, and we now have a staff on board. Carrie Hearn is the director. She worked for the Department of Energy here in the Commonwealth, and I think she has 4 staff members now. We're going to be doing a lot of that work in terms of building on what myself and a number of others have been doing and working with Dominion and what have you to come up with policy ideas. And what I've asked Senator Surabel to do is, let's get out of the habit of doing what we do in the General Assembly, which is throwing bills up against the wall, seeing what sticks, and then trying to create policy out of that particular bill. See if we can cram into it and make it fit, and we'll divide it up into a couple of bills. Let's find out where we want to go, and then have the CEUR have the time and the energy and the skills to turn that into effective legislation that we can track and make it work. And we do want to create, we do want to, make sure that we maintain local authority. But at the same time, we want to provide information that makes that easier, rather than just saying, no, I've never seen solar panels in my community and I don't want them there because I don't like them. Why don't you like them? I don't want to look at them. It's not the world I live in. I live in an agricultural community. We don't want to see that. We're seeing some ideological resistance to solar facilities, even though they may be an economic benefit to that particular locality. So we need to destigmatize some of that so that we're all in this together. I don't want to see any locality overburdened with too much or more than they can handle or more than they want. But we've had some early adopting counties. And they're pretty much have filled up their cookie jar with how much they want, and that's a good thing. It works for them, and I'd like to see others do it as well. And I've always been a proponent of the fact that Northern Virginia has to do its share. We don't have the ability to do much in the way of utility scale solar, at least in my county, Fairfax, or in Arlington, or in Alexandria. But what we can do is start electrifying our schools. But the problem there is, and we have to sort this out, is how is that stuff going to get onto the grid, into our transmission system and our distribution system. There's capacity issues there that have to be dealt with. And there's technology. And who's going to pay for the things that maintain the reliability that Dominion needs? It's part of their goal, their charter, is to make sure that electricity is reliable. You just can't throw a bunch of stuff on there and then hope for the best. And working with them, I have found that working with our power companies, they want to do this. They want to succeed. They want to maintain their relationships with localities, which are good ones. But all of us need to sort this out. How many of y'all remember the game when you were kids, pick-up sticks? Remember that? You're trying to get off the sticks off the pile without moving anybody else's stick. You're trying to get them off of there, and what have you, and it's hard. It is not easy to do one thing that doesn't impact somebody else. One of the things that was sort of an eye-opener for me is I went to the Spotsylvania facility, which is supposed to be the largest solar facility east of the Mississippi, 6,500 acres. 3,500 acres under solar panels, the rest bordered. It's worked by sheep to keep the grass down under the facilities. They move the sheep around and goats around it. It's amazing. 485 megawatts. 6,500 acres. A 300 megawatt nuclear, small modular nuclear reactor can do 300 megawatts on 40 acres. You know, we got land use considerations, which are important to localities. You know, I know that. Richard Stewart, I was at his presentation earlier on the rural agriculture stuff about water and you know, how we're going to cool things, these data centers, and the fact that salt water is coming up the rivers because we're taking too much water out of the Potomac aquifer. And you know, so we've got those kinds of problems that are parallel to the ones we're talking about here, but very, very much integrated. But I always love to tell a story, and I'll close with this, is that at one point in time, one of the precursors to Dominion Energy was Dominion, and one of its forefathers was in the trolley car business, electric trolley cars. And somebody figured out, hey, wait a minute, this electricity is worth more on the open market than it is running trolleys. You know, hence you have a power company. America, Virginia, has always been able to adapt and deal with these challenges. You know, as long as we sit down in an honest format to be able to solve them, and people are willing to collaborate, compromise, and make changes. But we all have to give a little if we want to get a lot.
Thank you for that. And data centers, of course, have come up a couple times in the conversation, so I just want to give a shameless plug about the podcast that we did a couple months ago with Joe Lurch and Vaco on data centers. So it's a Vaco podcast called Pulse, and if you go on the Vaco website, you can listen to it. It's a 3-part series talking about data centers with myself and Equinix, one of the international data center organization. There was an article today in the Virginia Mercury. I'm going to stick with Senator Marsden for just a moment. And it described a seed of an idea. I know that you're not necessarily ready to, you know, put pen to paper on all these things just yet, but there was a seed of an idea about a commission, some sort of a commission in the state that would provide information to localities on siting. Can you just describe that just a little bit, please?
Well, it's a work in progress, and as I said, you know, I cannot thank Vaco enough for doing this, because you know, this is tricky territory for them to step into. But the idea here is they're under the auspices of a state agency with appointed members and what have you. We could create a group that evaluates and creates a map in Virginia. Where do things belong? You know, where do data centers belong? Where do solar facilities belong, where they have access to transmission, where they're not using prime farmland, where they're not cutting down too many trees, where you can screen them appropriately, where it distributes them fairly, where nobody's asked to do more than they should. Because we do want to maintain a culture in our you know, historic, you know, rural parts of Virginia. But we need to recognize that the world is changing. And we have to change with it. And what we want, and one of the things I appreciated more than anything that I heard in my 6 groups that I met with over 2 days, is somebody in the Virginia Free Group, while we were talking, when I was talking about all this process we were going through, he said, it's just like Moneyball, the movie, what was it, the Oakland Days? Process, process, process. If you put process in place where people get heard and get heard again, and that we refine it and refine it and refine it, we can get, you know, to reasonable compromise here in the Commonwealth. But when people feel like something's just being crammed down their throat, they're not going to like that. That's not the way we want this to work. I know Dominion and APCO want to maintain their relationships with their localities. I want to do the same thing with my colleagues in the legislature. But it's all process. Got to start somewhere, and you know, I think we're off to a pretty good start. Let's identify the problems and let's start solving them.
Thank you. For Mr. Larson, for counties wishing to engage Dominion on energy planning, this includes demand, generation, transmission. What's the best way to get started?
So we've got a fantastic team of state and local affairs representatives, cover pretty much all the areas that we serve in a lot of the counties where we work with co-ops, with transmission service. So the first step would be to really reach out to them, and certainly we very much welcome that early engagement. It's much better to start very early in the process if you're thinking about an area to develop, or if there are areas that are specifically sensitive that we may not have awareness of, as we're looking at the infrastructure that's needed to provide power. Let's get started early on and talk and engage, because it's a whole lot easier to come to some sort of solution when the table and the book's wide open before you started flipping pages and you're halfway through a book, right? So I would say reach out to our team, and they're readily available to come out and work with you. They'll bring subject matter experts if you have questions about technologies or environmental or culturally sensitive or historical areas, and work with your teams to make sure that we can get the best solution that's needed.
Thank you. I'll stick with this question is going to be for both gentlemen, but I'll stick with Mr. Larson. We did talk a little bit about unforeseen market demands and innovation technologies, but could you expound a little bit on what you see coming down the pike as far as innovative technologies that might help?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest things that I think will get here quickest is frankly small modular reactors, right? We certainly have large units, and we have really small units on Navy boats, right? They've been working in Navy boats around the world for decades, right? So how do you take and figure out something in between and make it have that great safety record that frankly we have for both ends of those spectrums? I think you're going to see that in the late, early to mid-30s, where those will be commercially available and deployable technologies. So that's a really good opportunity. I guess being a chemical engineer, one of the things I've always been personally excited about is the hydrogen economy, right? It makes a whole lot of sense. We have been doing things to look at how can you take hydrogen, get that injected into natural gas lines and start with blending, but eventually potentially move to fully fired units on hydrogen. So any recent gas turbine that we have can fire 100% hydrogen. Some of the older ones can fire blended hydrogen. So can we take, when we have an excess of solar production in the middle of the day, which is not when we use it when everybody goes home, hooks all these things up at home, turns on the stove, the washer, the dryer. So can we take and maybe with that excess energy, make hydrogen? You can store it, it's a gas, so right away you kind of get the storage as well, kind of two birds with one stone. And then when that peak time comes, fire up a turbine using hydrogen and you don't have carbon emissions with that. Or as we're starting, if you're doing a blend, you reduce the carbon emissions. Because as the senator said, we're going to have to use gas as a bridge fuel to get there to have that reliability. We can't not do that today. But how do we even go beyond just saying, hey, we need gas, how can we lessen the impact of that? So I think those are two that I would say to me are the most promising.
One of the things I've been hearing about, I'm certainly not in the technical aspects of clean energy and the data center world, but there are folks in Southwest Virginia who talk about using mine water, which is 55-degree mine water, to cool data centers so that we don't have to delete our aquifers. And we're also looking at, there's technology out there, I believe, that it's being put to use for air-cooled data centers. I don't know what the limitations on that are, but my wife and I were having a discussion earlier. She's a science person, gets all the science magazines, and talking about geothermal for data centers, to be able to circulate water underground at 55 degrees, bring it up, use it to cool the data center, then take it back underground and recool it. There are things that can be done. My big hope is, and I'm hearing some good things, is around nuclear, is around fusion. Right now, nuclear, small, North Anna and Surrey plants are fission, nuclear fission, which is hot and tricky and can melt down and have all kinds of issues with them. Small modular nuclear reactors are safer. They're almost meltdown proof. If what I'm being told is accurate. We just need to find a way to make them in a modular fashion so that we can make them off-site efficiently, ship them and assemble them to get the cost down. Because right now the cost is pretty significant for a small modular reactor, but you have to start somewhere. The first car that Henry Ford built probably wasn't $500. It takes a while to get this stuff up and going. But fusion, which solves a lot of the safety issues and the fuel issues and what have you, it's basically the process of the sun. I think it's doable. There are folks who've done some stuff on a small scale that works. Question is, scaling it up to make it work and create a 400 megawatt fusion reactor. And we need to look at different models. The model we've always had too with Dominion is they build an energy producing facility and they earn a certain profit on that that's designated by law. I think right now it's what, 10%? Something like roughly 10% on what they get to do. And now they've just gone into an agreement with Amazon for Amazon to be able to make payments and then transfer, the process called transfer.
Transfer the asset as they go forward.
Right.
Lots to work out on that.
A lot to work out on, but we're making progress so that we're not stuck in the same model. Remember Winston Churchill said about democracy? It's the worst form of government except for all the others.
Right.
And it's the same thing here, is that we have a system where Dominion is responsible to the Commonwealth of Virginia and to the best interest of its citizens. It's governed by the FCC, but at the same time, they're responsible to stockholders. Nobody wants to turn, at least I don't, to turn our power companies into private nonprofits or let the government run. I don't think so. We've got a system. We need to find the best way to make it work because it is a workable system. Is it the best? I don't know. But it's the best one I've heard of. And when you see what's going on in places like Texas and things like that, where people aren't hooked into the PJM grid and what have you, they're trying to survive all on their lonesome, and disaster hits, and with this climate we're going through right now, God knows what can hit our power supply. So there's a lot going on out there in terms of technology that can soften the blows of energy demand and meet them more efficiently. I know Dominion and NAPCO are working hard on an energy efficiency program, on battery storage, and there is a wire that has been created, and apparently there's some issue with getting it up and running, but it can carry 40% more electricity the way it's coiled.
More than the reconductor wires?
So that's the gaps looking at new conductor technologies.
Okay.
And it is. There's some pretty tremendous things, and it's not just even the conductors. It's the equipment we put at substations. And so we've been really using those, and you can almost increase the capacity of some of these lines between 40 and 50%. They work in some locations. They don't work like well in the swamps or those areas. It seems they like a little, we're learning some things as we go through, new technologies and limitations, but we've been using and deploying those over the past 8 to 10 years. And it's really getting great benefit to the grid. Now, it can't get us all the way to that 44,000 megawatts for transmission capacity, but where we can apply it, we'll apply it so that you have less infrastructure that has to be done. So if we can just upgrade lines and deliver more energy with the same structures, that's what we're looking at.
Two things along those lines. We do have at least one company in Loudoun County that's working on the air cooling. And so they have a sample system set up in an office building over there on 28. So they're working on that technology and trying to find data centers to pilot the technology. And then also, all of these technologies, Delegate David Reed from Loudoun County, as you can imagine, this is very interesting for us in Loudoun County, had a paper, commissioned a paper with VASEM, nonpartisan academic group that went through each of the proposed technologies and how close we are to actually seeing those technologies working for us, how, the cost and all the costs and benefits of those technologies. So if anybody wants it, feel free to email me, email my office, and we'll send it along. I have one more question before we get to the audience, and you may have probably didn't see it, but I'm sure a number of hairs went up on folks' necks when you talked about mapping counties and where certain things should go in counties. That's going to get a little bit probably dicey for some of us. But one of the things that we talked about a lot in Loudoun County was the ability, and we've asked some of our delegation about this, but localities right now do not have the authority or the ability to consider power supply when we are looking at applications and rezonings for data centers or anything really. So could that be considered? Is there any discussion about giving local authority to consider power supply? Because we can go and approve and deny data centers. We approve data centers and we don't know where the power is coming from. Has there been any discussion about that, or will you bring it up in your
Well, I think
summit?
that is going to be something that the Commission on Electric Utility Regulation, will be looking at as part of this larger exercise at looking at public policy around clean energy and how we get there, and dealing with our transmission issues. The feds have certain control over when transmission goes across state lines and what have you, but stuff that occurs right within a county, that certainly we want to give counties as much authority as we feel we can. I know I have introduced bills that have helped localities deal with the environmental and soil issues around installing solar because they don't have that kind of staff. And so, we provided positions at DEQ to work with some of these smaller localities so they can have the economic benefit of the solar and be able to have confidence in the planning that's going on. So these are all, great questions, Julie. Some of it's above my pay grade. But the thing is, now we have a professional staff, and we have revitalized the Electric Utility Commission, and I think that portends very, very good things for the future to solve those kinds of problems. But I can't really speculate on what's likely to come out of their process. All I can do is feed them what information I've gotten through my process, and hope the best.
Yeah, we do appreciate the work. So we've got about 15 or 20 minutes, so if we have some questions, raise your hand. We'll have to go to the president first, and Malik.
So, mostly for Mr. Larson, sort of key questions. We're mentioning solar interconnections, you mentioned the term. I guess that's homemade solar put back on the grid. How does community solar fit into that? And is there a fee reduction considered that would actually allow community solar to happen? Second quick question, you mentioned data center pays for interconnection fees. Does that mean substation and transmission line extension? Because I understood the opposite, so I'd love clarity on that. Thank you.
Let's see, so for community solar, and that's, you start looking at community solar programs, and that's one of the topics the State Corporation Commission has taken up, distributed energy resources, and how should that be connected? How is that cost allocated between different customers? And that proceeding, and they'll be going through their process with that. On data centers, they pay for that substation and that interconnection facility specifically for their location. Because the transmission aspect of it, the broader transmission, benefits more customers than just them typically, then all the customers pay for it, but that's where we've done the adjustments with the cost allocation. I think it's the last slide in there that shows where data centers are carrying more of that cost.
Hi, Libby Garvey from Arlington County. Thank you so much for being here. What a hugely important topic. I think we all know electricity is what our modern civilization depends on. My concern in Arlington County, we don't do big data centers, we don't do solar farms, is energy resiliency. And it seems to me, which is part of what you're talking about and all of the alternatives is great, it seems to me we need almost a two-pronged approach because no matter what you do, as long as you're doing transmission across these lines, we're vulnerable. All you have to do is cut a line. It takes one bad actor with a machine gun to take out a transmission station. It's going to be vulnerable just by the very setup. So it seems to me to be energy resilient, we want to do more of hyper-local, in other words, encouraging residences and businesses to put in their own solar that can power and have their own battery backup. So if the power goes down, somebody takes out a transmission station, a derecho storm takes out a whole lot, people have some power there. And it feels to me like it's a two-pronged approach, and that the really hyper-local is equally important, and that we should and could be doing a lot more to encourage and help and support very local energy on residences and businesses. Thank you so much. Happy for any comments or thoughts you've got. Thank you.
You know, absolutely. You know, there are the big solutions, the big utility scale things, and then there's the cognitive collective factor of a whole lot of small things, community solar, businesses able to, create their own electricity through solar or wind or whatever. We have to keep open minds and the ability to give our localities the flexibility to do that. We're a Dillon rule state, as you know. Sometimes that works real well for you, sometimes it doesn't. But it is the system that we have here, and I'm for giving localities the authority to do whatever they think is best, as long as it fits into the larger state plan and set of state goals. Let's turn everything everything loose to make these things happen. In California, they're dumping electricity every day. Not every day, but certain days they have more than they need, and they're just dumping it into the ground. And so, from what I understand, they're starting to back off of the incentives for home solar that are being metered into the system, because they need to invest in battery storage, because they're dumping it in the daytime and they need it at night. And so, that sounds to me like progress. They have a new problem to solve now, but they solved another one. They've got a lot of electricity. Now, how do they store it? How do they use it efficiently? And where do they put the state subsidies away from homeowners now? Got enough of that, but how do we put that into batteries, invest our money there, because that's what we need.
There's a little country called Uruguay, which is 100% renewable energy now, and they're selling their energy to other parts of Europe. So it's definitely a possibility. They're very small, though. Any other questions? Yes, sir, in the back.
Thank you. Mike Carter, Franklin County. Senator, thank you for being here. My question is for John. Under your IRP, I sort of ranked those quickly. Solar is number one, natural gas is number two. And reading recently, I understand Dominion is planning on building 5 or more gas-powered plants. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, perhaps location and purpose?
So in the Integrated Resource Plan, the IRP, we do call for natural gas facilities. Those will really run during the times that is the coldest or the hottest, right? That's what they're for, is to follow the load at those peak times for our customers. And as we make this transition, we're going to have natural gas facilities to be able to do that. So, great example, Winter Storm Elliott. Christmas Eve a couple of years ago. What time do you think our peak load was during the 24 hours of the day? It was at 4 a.m., right? So solar's a fine resource, but guess what? It wasn't producing any energy there. And we were able to have our gas units, our coal units that we still have, there's only a couple, and 1 or 2 oil units that are kind of for these super peak times. So as we continue to see this load growth, it's going to call for natural gas. Keep in mind, again, those turbines will run very rarely, not all the time. And they will also all be capable of fueling off hydrogen. The only thing that we have announced is over in Chesterfield are 4 peaker units right now. Other than that, we don't have any locations or have identified where those might be. And a lot of that's going to depend on, as we continue to see the grid grow and renewable resources, where do we need to locate those assets to support the grid? It's already a robust network, so that's why if one transmission line gets cut, very frequently we can restore power very quickly because it's networked together. Well, think about now, we used to have, even 15 years ago in Virginia, let's say 20 or so primary power stations, and we had lines that ran to the load centers, the cities. That's where the bulk of the power went. And then we also had lines that took it to rural areas and got to distribution voltage very quickly. Well, now we've got resources that are spread out everywhere, so we've got to increase that network. It actually builds a much more stronger and robust grid because we can switch and move that energy around better. But it's going to take having gas resources and making sure that we have a really robust transmission system to keep that reliability there.
I think there was a question in the front.
Yeah, Ike Ross from Fauquier County. A couple of questions for John. The projections that you have, the one chart that goes to 45,000 megawatts, the other talks about 39,998, meeting 100% of the demand. So I'm curious about the delta between those two. And secondly, when many of us on the ground could see, from a land use perspective, could see the demand that was increasing rapidly about a year before PJM light bulb went off, right? And so I'm curious, what is that lag, and is there a way to improve it? And are the numbers you're projecting, the 45,000, are those inclusive of everything we know out there, or are those just those that have load letters, or are those just that are under construction? Where, what is the real number?
So that 45,000 is what PJM has taken, and it looks at the forecast. So beyond load letters, right? We don't have load letters for 15 years now already. So they're looking at what the projections are and what we are hearing from customers, and the information we provide, as well as what they collect and do their analytics, and just looking at the societal trends with, I'll say, digitization and what that's going to drive across the PJM footprint. And then they look at each one of the zones in it. So that's really what does it. Part of the process is it's just like our IRP. These things go on cycles. So all of a sudden you started seeing this AI take off, but it was before they had done their analysis to pull it. So you had that kind of lag of time frame saying, oh, wait a minute, we're really seeing the accelerator's been pressed here. And we've got this rapidly changing demand signal just from what they had modeled from the year before. So that's the kind of thing that contributes to these models lagging.
I know from our perspective, we're not in any conversations with folks from Dominion about what we know to be our land use decisions. And so, and I would suspect the same is true for the other neighboring jurisdictions. So how are you projecting the things that we know are going on? Are you relying simply on being told by customers? Or are you, for instance, we have a number of projects that don't have customers yet. There are no load letters. There are no forecasts. There's a developer or a speculator that's got something, they're rezoning it. And that number may not be in the projections, or it isn't something.
So I think that's where we do have what we know, certainly that's a basis. And then, when you look at econometric models where it shows here's what's expected in this area, and when PJM does their modeling, they come up with that. To the degree that, we don't know what we don't know, right? So we can plan for what we know what the models forecast. But if there's significant plans that you would have as a county, I would really encourage you to start very early and collaborate and think about, are there certain corridors you may want to look at where infrastructure would be to serve that, whether it be water or electric, and kind of think about those when you're doing your land use plan and involve economic development in our state local affairs team so that they can. Where we've done that, it's been really successful, and it helps pave the way. Sometimes the growth outstrips that, as we've seen in some locations, but it's a really good way to think about it, and then up front you're taking into account, and you can look at contingencies and adopting as you go forward. Because it's really hard with this AI trend taking place. I don't think anybody, if you would have asked me that 3 or 4 years ago, I would have told you, have you lost your mind, right? What are you talking about? There's no way we'll grow that fast. We already thought we were one of the fastest growing areas, and then this just really jumped up on top of it.
And one last follow-up on that, and it's been a little bit touched on, but the school rooftop. We've tried to do a number of projects, or we've initiated a number of projects. What we're hearing from the vendors is Dominion has a bit of a roadblock going on with the connection requirements. And I know that some of that's being litigated through SEC, et cetera. Interestingly, when I reached out to our local Dominion correspondent, wanting more transparency to understand what's driving this, he connected me with somebody at Dominion that said, yeah, there's not much I can do about that, but we'd like to rent your rooftops from you so that we can put solar on them. So I'm wondering, this is a legitimate question, is Dominion throwing these roadblocks up for a competitive advantage?
Absolutely not. I would just flat out
Sorry, I'm being
say that.
cynical, I know. But
Yeah. No, I mean, and the thing is that whether it's Dominion Energy or if it's a third party, those interconnection requirements are the same. Okay? And it's really to make sure that you have the reliability for the grid there. Because what you can't have happen is that the system would cause any type of thing to happen to the grid. There's also a safety issue, right? To make sure that if the power goes out and we have a line worker there working on that line, that facility is disconnected. And unfortunately, some years ago, we had a worker working there in storm recovery, and someone had a generator, and they had fired it back up, and it backfed, and unfortunately, it was a fatality for that line worker who was trying to restore service. So it's extremely important that we make sure safety and reliability are there for workers and for everyone that's connected to the grid.
So, we have time for maybe one or two more questions.
I'm Doug Norway, County, I'm also a
Excellent.
former Exxon executive. You've talked about solar and wind and nuclear, but the elephant in the room is hydrocarbon. And I guess the question I'd ask is, what technologies are you applying in the hydrocarbon area to sequester or capture the carbon? That's clearly growing technology that meets the end of clean energy.
So the biggest thing is we have teams that are following technologies, and we would need a commercially available and viable technology for us to use. So we'll follow things, but just like other utilities, we're not going to buy it until it's commercially available and it's backed and we know it's been tested and can count on it. So those are the types of things. We're not looking at technologies that would capture carbon coming out of the stack right now and put it in some other form for storage. When something's there that's really available that we could use on a gas plant, we would certainly take a look at doing that.
I can just piggyback in a general sense on that. Back in the 90s, AT&T did a study on how many cell phones would be used in the United States of America by a certain date. And they spent, I think, $12 million with a big company to pull all this data together. And they came up with a number of 995,000 cell phones in use. Well, you just covered Fairfax County. And so, a lot of the stuff is the great unknown as to what technology can do. In that I'm hoping for fusion. But it's like anything. Dominion has to plan. We have to create policy based on what is the known, what is real, what is available, what is practical, and we can hope for the best, but we have to use what we got to get what we want.
One more. Go ahead, sir.
So take me to the year 2035, and we've got a very large share of our power coming from wind, if you even double it, and solar. How do you assure Virginians that the system is reliable? Is it completely natural gas? Hoping battery storage becomes better, or interconnection with other states to, how do we assure when we're going to have a reliable system at that time if the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow?
So it's a really interesting dynamic, and that's why the complex models of the IRP are there to look, and the reliability is the #1 driving factor. So that's why you see small modular reactors, and you see natural gas units there to be able to follow that load. With the small modular reactors, just like a Navy boat may speed up or slow down, as opposed to a large central station. We don't like to cycle those. We want to run, from outage to outage. Well, the SMRs can follow load, and then the natural gas plants can follow load. So we would look at, those as two primary load following resources that we would use to assure we have reliability from a generation perspective.
Let's hope for SMRs, because that's still not sure. And I come from a long nuclear background. That is not a sure today.
Thank you. Yeah, the VASCM paper talks about that a little bit. In our last moments, I'm going to take moderator's privilege to ask one more question about something we haven't talked about, and that's district energy. When down at NACO, I don't know if anyone else did this, but I toured their landfill, and they are powering actually their entire wastewater facility and then some with that. And then there was a story on 60 Minutes recently about an oil refinery powering data centers with the energy that's being pushed off of the oil. So can you talk a little bit about that as a possibility? Will it make any dents?
So district heating and cooling, it's a little more prevalent in Europe, where you have very dense populations in city areas. And you can take an energy source or either waste energy from some sort of facility, heat water primarily, and pump it around to use for heating and for hot water sources. So you'll see that, and also you can use different types of chillers to do that as well. It tends to work in extremely dense city populations that have a large facility nearby that has waste energy, or either that can produce energy. It's become extremely difficult in the United States to permit some sort of facility that might have emissions, because the non-attainment zones close to those very high dense areas where you typically would have that type of concentrated load. It gets to be, it gets to be very expensive to pipe it a long ways and to maintain that, and with the losses to have it be very effective.
Yeah, related to what you were asking, Julie, NOVAC, Northern Virginia Electric Cooperative, has a facility in South Boston where they take wood products from within, I think, a 50-mile radius. Sawdust from the mill, the scrap wood, the things left over from forestry, and burn it. And the idea here is, well, look, if you left it where it is, didn't do anything with it, it turns into methane. And now, methane is some 26 times worse than carbon, but it doesn't hang in the atmosphere anywhere near as long. And I've never gotten a definitive answer from anyone as to what the truth is about methane and whether it is something that is worth getting out of our landfills and burning to create electricity, or a power plant that is operated on wood that prevents it from becoming methane. Environmental groups say one thing, certain scientists say another. A lot of disagreement there, and I've never gotten a definitive answer on the whole issue of what we do with methane. Is it worth burning it, or do we ignore it and let it dissipate from the atmosphere more quickly?
Well, until we know, we're just about out of time. Would either of you like to take 30 seconds to close?
I think we kind of laid out the case here between the two of us that we do have a dynamic period in the energy space here. And it's really tracking a dynamic period in society that's driving it. And it's going to take a lot of collaboration between localities, between states, between utilities and other service providers to be able to meet those needs of our customers as they grow. And it's probably going to take an all of the above approach with all types of generation resources, because each one of them has really great strengths, and there's some weaknesses of each one of them as well. But you've got to look at that portfolio in the balance. I came along, you had oil, gas, hydro, and coal. Nuclear was just kind of starting when I was young, right? Well, now we're seeing coal pretty much step out of the way. There's a few units left. Most of the others of those are still there, and we're adding all the renewables that have very different operating characteristics. So it's how do we get that puzzle piece together as we look to try to transition to basically a zero carbon environment as we move forward. So working together is going to be the way to get there and collaborate.
I, couldn't agree more. Chip Woodrum, a lot of people's legislative heroes, once said that the Virginia General Assembly was the world's greatest assemblage of C students. we only know what we know because what we hear from others. We sit down there and all day long lobbyists and government officials and nonprofit folks come into us and give us their stories. We know a little about a lot. But a lot of you know a lot about a little. And you know the landscape in your community. You know the landscape. And you know how hard it is as VACO to merge all the different, from rural counties to suburban counties, the differences in philosophy and goals and political viewpoints. It's hard to pull all that stuff together. So the better organized you are to come to us with a unified message, where you have worked out problems to a certain extent in advance, and you bring us a certain level of collaboration and cooperation and compromise so that we don't have to do it. Because we're not as knowledgeable as you are, and as you've seen over the years, we can sometimes really do some stupid things. But it all depends on the information that we get from you. So refine that to the best that you can. You're ably led by your VACO staff here, and Dean Lynch. He and I go way back when he was in the juvenile justice world, and I was director of the Department of Juvenile Justice 24 years ago. And so relationships, build them, learn who to trust, be open to new ideas, and get the best possible information you can to your General Assembly members for us to make policies that are going to work best for the community, Commonwealth, and the United States.
Thank you very much. And your summit is the 18th?
The 18th, it is going to be at the Hilton out in Short Pump. We'll have about 200 people there at this point in time. But it's designed to be a problem-solving summit as opposed to, let's find out who to blame for why we solved all our clean energy problems. And to get that going, and the CEUR will be there to tell you what their goals are and how they're going to operate. PJM will be there to explain how that whole process works of the Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland system, the 13-state system that we're engaged in. We'll be talking battery storage, efficiency, nuclear, all these different things to try to educate delegates, senators, and their staffs and the lobbying world. But everything's processed, and I think we've put together a good one. And now I just turn it over to the CEUR, which is the appropriate place for it to be, not with a single senator who's just doing the best he can to put information out there. It's got to get into a formal governmental process, and that's what the CEUR will be. And that's a huge step forward that Senator Silverbill has put together to take us forward into the energy future.
Thank you very much. If there are any resources that were mentioned, feel free to contact myself or Mr. Lurch or my chief of staff, even if you don't mind raising your hand if there's anything you guys are interested in. And big thank you to our guest, Senator Marsden, Mr. Larson. Thank you so much.